Part 35. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Wich Jong Word. Chapter 341. Chapter 341. It's best to have a domineering son. Lee Baikin was in a good mood after learning that Huo Linyuan had taken Lan Min abroad for treatment. After all, if this is the case, the so-called male and female protagonists will not appear in front of them for a long time. Immediately ask Josu to order a bouquet of roses for him and a restaurant. Lee Baikin felt that he could take advantage of this time where the male and female protagonists would not be disturbed to build up some affection for Sunian. When he was about to get off work, Lee Baikin came to Sunian with a rose, planning to have a romantic date. But the plan is beautiful, but the reality is cruel. Wow, Baikin, is this rose for me? Sunian covered her mouth with her hands, eyes full of surprise. But what he heard was, "Rose, this is too tacky. But what happened today? Why did you send me roses?" Lee Baikin, aren't roses the symbol of romance? But this guy is a bit stingy, he only has so few roses. You must know that Mo Bao gave me 9,999 roses in his previous life. As expected, Lee Baikin, the front wave, can't compare to me, Mo Bao, the back wave. I still have to show that I am very happy, and I also have to show that I have no knowledge. It is really difficult. When Lee Baikin heard this, he felt a flock of crows flying above his head. What did that brat mean when he gave his mother roses? Author, 9494. After finishing the work, what are you going to do? Sunian took the flowers and said, "What day is it today? Why did you give me roses?" "Because I want to send it." Lee Baikin felt that he still had to put a lot of thought into it in the future. "I suddenly remembered that I didn't even give you a flower. I felt that I was derelict in my duty. I'm sorry, I wronged you. I felt wrong that you need to wait for me. Wait for me to slowly learn to love you." Lee Baikin hugged Sunian from behind. This made Sunian feel as if he was electrocuted. The hot breath exhaled by the man slowly raised the temperature of the tips of her ears by a few points. This made Sunian couldn't help but want to struggle out of her arms, saying, "Ha ha ha, Baikin, it's already good that you can love me. Do you know? This is the most beautiful rose I have ever received in my life." Flower. Well, although the roses I received in my previous life were 1,000 or 10,000 times better than this rose, that happened in my previous life, so I wasn't lying. Besides, if you think with your toes, you can also imagine that Lee Baikin must have ordered Josu to buy this bouquet of roses. Maybe he didn't even pick it, and maybe he even saw the rose a few minutes before me. Task. The roses my Mo Bao sent me were chosen by him personally in the rose garden. Hey, I really don't know why the heroine in the novel was excited when she saw the roses bought by the hero. She either picked them herself or spent money on them. This made Lee Baikin lose all romantic thoughts in his heart. And when Sunian said this, he really felt a little guilty. There is no other way now but to continue to the next item. I have booked a good restaurant, let's go and check it out. Sunian agreed obediently. According to my experience, marrying a boss is not the best thing. Having a son of a boss is the most enjoyable thing. Hey, how long will it take for me to give birth to my baby Mo Bao? Wait a moment. This guy sent me roses out of nowhere and then made a reservation. How does this feel like a date? When he heard this, the corners of Lee Baikin's mouth couldn't help but raise. Sunian reacted. End of this chapter. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Wich Jong Word. Chapter 342. Chapter 342. Sunian's strange desire to win. The restaurant is located by the river. The gentle breeze of the setting sun blows in the face, blowing away people's tiredness from the day. The candle in the middle of the table swayed, illuminating the man and woman sitting across from each other. It actually added a bit of ambiguity to the whole atmosphere. Sunian felt this way, so he was a little geared up. In such an ambiguous atmosphere, it would be a pity if nothing happened. Fortunately, I carried the reward given to me by the old man with me. Lee Baiken, who originally wanted to say something. The reward will not be. I will find an opportunity to put something in the wine later. If he comes to settle the score with me tomorrow morning, then I will refuse to admit it and blame it all on the wine. After all, he prepared this wine, so it is definitely not my fault. Lee Baiken. It is indeed that thing. But what Lee Baiken didn't understand was how Sunian could carry it close to his body. Lee Baiken really wanted to laugh now. How does this little woman think? Sunian reached out and picked up the wine glass and shook it. Baiken, are we dating now? After hearing this, Sunian raised her head and looked at him. You may not believe it, but I really feel like I'm in a dream now. I really didn't expect that I would actually be sitting here on a date with you. It all seems like dream. I have thought of a way. Then I went to him with a wine glass to drink. Ha ha ha, I am so smart, as expected of me. Lee Baiken felt that the old man's reward was an absolute time bomb for him. He has to clear this ticking time bomb. Now the first step is to know where to put this time bomb. Lee Baiken stood up, walked to her side, rolled up his sleeves, then passed his arm to her, and said in a warm voice, "Bite me, do you think it hurts? If I feel pain, I can tell you that it's not a dream." These words made Sunian, who was originally planning to create an ambiguous atmosphere, break his guard and burst into laughter. This must be me biting myself. But if you or I get hurt, then I will feel bad, but I can swear for days that I will not lie to you. When Lee Baiken spoke, he glanced at Sunian's body. Things should be in her bag. After all, she didn't know in advance that he would do something like this. On the way here, she was always in his arms and had no chance to touch the bag. As long as Sunian's bag is solved, this time bomb can be completely solved. When Sunian heard this, his face turned red. Damn, my heartbeat is speeding up. Why do you seem to have no knowledge? When Lee Baiken heard this, the corners of his mouth raised unconsciously. He glanced at the river next to him, and suddenly felt that Josu was doing a good job and that this position was really good. Forget it, Baiken, if you are in pain, I will also feel sorry for you. Even if one of us really wants to feel pain, then I hope that person can be me. It's not just a matter of love, I am a person who has lived an extra life after all. How could this guy talk more than me? At this moment, Sunian's strange desire to win was aroused. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Wich John Word. Chapter 343. Chapter 343, Carry the gift from the old man with you. Lee Baiken raised his eyebrows. Okay, let's not talk about this anymore. If we say this, then the two of us will become puppies, biting each other like this, Lee Baiken said, picking up Sunian from the seat, and then sat down on the seat. Sunian? Why did he pick me up suddenly? Why did he pick me up? It was inconvenient for me. Baiken, please let me go. Sunian wanted to struggle away. This made Lee Baiken sure that the thing was in the bag. Why should you let go? I think this is the best. It was too far away just now. It didn't feel like a date, but more like a business negotiation. Lee Baiken reached out and picked up her scattered hair. Sunian glanced around subconsciously. Seeing the empty restaurant around her, she remembered that in the novel, the overbearing president always reserved the restaurant, so there was no one here. But even so, in this strange environment, Being so close to Li Baikan still made Sunian a little uncomfortable. After all, she will also be a domineering president in the future, and she will also be a person of status. Don't be afraid, we are a legal couple, it's okay if someone sees us. Li Baikan comforted her softly. But he really wanted to laugh. After all, the little woman who was just thinking about how to drug herself now looked like a frightened bird. These words successfully appeased Sunian. Sunian didn't even remember his purpose. She put her arms around his neck. I'm just not used to it. If you're not used to it, get used to it slowly anyway. I want to be so close to you all the time. The two of them pressed their cheeks against each other. Perhaps because it was already evening, even the face that had been carefully treated in the morning made Sunian feel a slight glare, and the slight rubbing caused ripples. Every moment. All the time, the man's tone was firm, and after speaking, he pecked Sunian's smooth cheek. I heard that the night scene here is pretty good at night, let me hug you to see it. As he spoke, the man stood up. However, when she stood up, she accidentally knocked the bag she put on the table directly into the river. Sunian has always boasted that he has lived an extra lifetime, has seen countless storms, and has an unusually thick skin, but after hearing these words, his face couldn't help but heat up. But the sound of something falling into the water brought her back to her thoughts. My bag, Sunian exclaimed subconsciously. I'm sorry, I wanted to hold you closer to the river to see the scenery on the river. If I accidentally bump into it, don't be angry. I will compensate you. Li Baikan admitted his mistakes and had a very positive attitude in admitting them. If I lose one of you, I'll compensate you 10. Sunian looked away from the river and smiled when he saw Li Baikan, who had a positive attitude towards admitting his mistakes. Pay me 10, haha, he is indeed the boss, but why didn't he say pay 100, so that he can have the strength of the boss? Li Baikan immediately added, why don't you speak? Do you think I am not sincere? In this case, can I compensate you 100? When he said this, Li Baikan pressed her forehead. If Mrs. Li, if you are still not satisfied, then 1,000 will do, as long as Mrs. Li can forgive my unconscious mistake. Li Baikan's behavior finally made Sunian amused. Ha ha ha, this guy is indeed a pure tyrant. Just when Li Baikan was about to relax and take Sunian for a peaceful tour. But there is nothing important in the bag. Fortunately, I took the old man's gift with me and didn't put it in the bag. Otherwise, I would be too embarrassed to ask the old man for it if I lost it. Li Baikan, carry it with you, carry it with you. Why do you need to carry it with you? Author, don't underestimate a woman's determination to accomplish something. End of this chapter. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Wich Jong Word. Chapter 344. Chapter 344. Li Baikan Emos. The reason why Sunian carries things with him. It is because of my experience as a domineering and wise CEO in my previous life. Sometimes opportunities are fleeting, so if you carry it with you, you can take action at any time. It's just a little bit of stuff anyway, and it doesn't take up much space, so you can just put it in your pocket. But now it has been proven that Sunian's habit is very good. Sunian also saw that Li Baikan's expression was a bit broken, but she thought he was tired from hugging him, so she said thoughtfully, Baikan, if you are tired, then just put him down. You're not tired, I can hold you the whole time. Li Baikan sorted out his emotions. He really felt that the woman in his arms didn't weigh much, so he couldn't help but think of her in the dream. The belly is frighteningly big, and the eye sockets are sunken, even like a walking corpse. This made Li Baikan feel that he needed to take good care of her body and raise her well. When it gets completely dark. Suddenly a flower exploded in the black sky. This sudden sound startled Sunian. She turned around and saw a huge word neon blooming in the sky. When one word disappears, the next word immediately follows. I know the roses I gave you just now are a bit tacky, so I want to give you something special and unique. Lee Baiken breathed a sigh of relief when he saw the surprise in the woman's eyes. It should be okay this time. Fortunately, he had prepared a backup plan. Fireworks are bright and gorgeous, who doesn't like them? Especially under the gorgeous fireworks, the low voice rang in her ears. Even in such a deafening environment, Sunian could clearly hear the sound of his own heartbeat speeding up. She smiled. I mean it this time. Although this is not as grand as the fireworks that Mo Bao made to celebrate my birthday in my previous life, it is still very beautiful. Exquisite. Lee Baiken's smile froze on his face. The city is full of fireworks? From that brat? This made Lee Baiken couldn't help but imagine in his mind how the fireworks all over the city would compare with his own. It seems that he is indeed a bit petty. He is going to be emo. But Sunian was very happy. After all, although the fireworks were exquisite, who doesn't love the splendor in the dark night? Although Lee Baiken was emo, he finally smiled when he saw Sunian being so happy. After all, what else can I do? I can only think more carefully in the future. And let Sunian understand that his front wave is better than that brat's back wave. Wait for the fireworks to end. Lee Baiken kissed her. Beside the sparkling river, she couldn't help but indulge in his deep kiss. Whatever it is. When she came back to her senses, she realized that she was pressed against a wall. I remember that the old man had told me many times before that I was blind. At that time, I really dismissed it, but facts have proved that if you don't listen to the old man, you will suffer a lot. Fortunately, my eyes recovered and it happened in time, so I still have a chance to make it up to you. Lee Baiken didn't believe it. That brat could still say this. Seeing the woman's fair face gradually turn crimson, her eyelashes fluttered and fluttered. Sunian felt that his gaze was too hot, and she couldn't help but want to reach out to cover his eyes. But as soon as she reached out her hand, the man gently took her into his mouth. At this moment, her body felt like an electric shock. Ambiguity and are radiating to the extreme. Mo Bao, haha, using the leftover things I played in my previous life to coax my mother, someone's methods are really low level. End of this chapter. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Wich John Word. Chapter 345. Chapter 345. The serious and studious Lee Baiken. Lee Baiken sat upright in the study, as if waiting for important documents. When Josu came to the room, he felt the atmosphere and shuddered subconsciously. Have you brought anything? As soon as Josu stepped into the door, Lee Baiken asked immediately. Josu nodded, then respectfully walked to Lee Baiken, and quickly took out a few books from his briefcase. Mr. Lee, I have bought the books you want, can you take a look? If you feel if it doesn't work, then I'll choose again. I saw the book Josu put on the desk. How to Conquer Beautiful Girls. 100 Things You Must Do to Chase Girls. 36 Strategies for Love. Lee Baiken casually picked up one of these books and read it with a very serious attitude. Although Josu bought these books, he couldn't help but say when he saw Lee Baiken's serious attitude, Mr. Lee, whatever you do is right in my mind, but your current operation. Although Josu is a single mother, he still feels that such an operation is not feasible. That's the way to please a girl. Just like that, he didn't know what Sunian was thinking, but he knew that if he were Sunian, he might be angry. I want to know what to do when falling in love. Lee Baiken felt that no matter how much the unborn brat did, he was still a son, and he couldn't do things between lovers. The key point is that Lee Baiken has no other way to know how to fall in love. So Lee Baiken feels that the book has its own golden house and its own Yanryu, and at least there can be a little more so-called references. Josu, you have been with Miss Lan for so many years, don't you have any experience? This made Lee Baiken stop. Josu wanted to slap himself when he saw Lee Baiken like this. After all, Lee Baiken and Sunian were so sweet now, and he was so early to let go. Josu really feels like he can't keep his salary now. Especially when I saw Lee Baiken's face looking very ugly. The reason why Lee Baiken's face was very ugly was because he remembered that he was controlled by the so-called plot and then worked as a licking dog for Lan Min. Who will be in a good mood if you think about it on a day when you are licking a dog? The key is that Lee Baiken can't say anything yet or tell others. He is forced to be a licking dog. After all, Josu had stayed with Lee Baiken for so many years, and his reaction was quick. "Mr. Lee, your attitude is really shocking. I believe that your hard work will definitely be rewarded, and you and your wife's love will definitely be stronger than gold and will become the most perfect love in the world." Lee Baiken, this flattery is very bad and has no technical content. If there is nothing else, you can go and do other things. Lee Baiken was afraid that if this guy continued to be here, he would be off by his flattery. When Josu heard this, he immediately felt as if he had received an amnesty, and then turned around and walked outside. However, after walking a few steps, Josu suddenly thought of something, stopped and said respectfully to Lee Baiken, "Mr. Lee, don't worry, I will definitely not tell my wife. I promise that I can make you have a perfect life room for performance." Josu felt that it was not easy to flatter Lee Baiken. It's better to stay with Sunian, don't be so cautious. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Wich John Word. Chapter 346. Chapter 346 The Talent of Coaxing People. Wait until Josu left. Lee Baiken took on the attitude of studying for a degree and years ago. No, he was more serious than studying for a degree. Read carefully. I spent 2 hours in the study room looking at it before I came out. As soon as Lee Baiken arrived in the living room, he unexpectedly heard Sunian's laughter. With the laughter, I walked over and found that Sunian was talking to Josu, and Sunian looked at Josu very seriously, with bright eyes. Lee Baiken, Josu, he, although I am single, I have the talent to coax women, how about it, are you envious? And Josu, who was talking to Sunian, felt more and more that being by Sunian's side was much better than being by Lee Baiken's side. After all, being by Sunian's side meant that he only had to have fun with Sunian, not Lee Baiken. So difficult to maintain. Lee Baiken's cold voice sounded, "What are you talking about? You are so happy. Can you tell me?" These words made Josu and Sunian feel that the temperature of the room had dropped a few degrees at the same time. Why is it so cold? Is the air conditioner broken? With such doubts, Sunian turned to look at Lee Baiken. "Josu is telling me about your past. When you first took over the company, you vigorously dealt with people who disobeyed you in the company. Baiken, you are really amazing. He and I are completely different types. If Lee Baiken dies in this life, I will do the same thing." It turned out to be about him. Lee Baiken's depressed mood immediately improved a lot, and he immediately came to Sunian's side. "If you want to know my story, you can ask directly without asking other people. I'm just talking casually." Sunian stretched casually, yawned, and asked habitually, "By the way, Baiken, you have been busy in the study for so long, you are busy with things finished?" Josu, who knew what Lee Baiken was doing in the study, burst into laughter when he heard this. Lee Baiken's eyes glanced directly over. Josu immediately shut his mouth. "Busy working? Why have you been busy for 2 hours today? Is there anything important in the company?" Sunian frowned when he said this. It's not that Sunian thinks too much, but how could Huo Linyuan, as the male protagonist, suffer such a disadvantage? Even if Huo Linyuan might suffer, the plot of this book would not allow him to suffer. Something bad might happen. Even though Lee Baikin was thick-skinned, he was a little embarrassed when he heard this. It's nothing, just trivial things. Did Huo Linyuan stir up something again? But Lee Baikin's embarrassed look seemed more like something had happened to Sunian. What is this guy doing hesitating like this? Did something happen again? Haha, I almost believed that this guy really changed again. Sure enough, there was something wrong with my brain. After all, Lee Baikin, the heroine Bai Guang who was set by the plot, could change a character who could be remembered by the heroine for a lifetime. No matter how the plot changes, such important characters will not change. Lee Baikin. Well, I suddenly remembered that I have something I don't know where I put it. After Sunian said this, he stood up and planned to leave. But why did Lee Baikin leave? He stretched out his hand to pull the person back. Don't think about it. There are some things that I can't tell you now. This made a big question mark appear in Sunian's head. End of this chapter. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Wich Jong Word. Chapter 347. Chapter 347 As expected of a father and son. Lee Baikin kissed Sunian's eyebrows under Sunian's confused eyes. You will know the specific matter later, but let me just say one thing, you can know anything you want to know about Huo Linyuan or things in the company. Sunian's curiosity was immediately aroused. It's not about work, Lee Baikin said again under Sunian's curious eyes. It's not about work. Sunian thought of the fireworks a few days ago and couldn't help but lower his head. Josu next to him sighed inwardly when he saw Lee Baikin like this. Because when he bought the book and came back to read it, he secretly flipped through the book. He really didn't think those words could impress Sunian. But Lee Baikin is not a simple person. If he thinks it is possible, then it will definitely be possible. Lee Baikin saw Sunian curious about the baby and couldn't help but say one more thing. I said I want to learn how to love you, so you can do the same. Listening to these words, Sunian's doubts in his heart slowly dissipated. So that's it, what on earth is he doing after staying here for so long? But his appearance reminds me of Mo Bao. In his previous life, Mo Bao was in love for the first time. When he was pursuing his daughter-in-law, he was a very straight man and bought a bunch of love books to study. Lee Baikin would never be like this. Lee Baikin, as expected of a father and son. Hey, it's funny when I think about it now. After all, the person who wrote this kind of book must be a single person. Mo Bao made a lot of jokes back then, ha ha ha. If Lee Baikin was like this, it would be really fun. Lee Baikin now has a pain in his chest. Those few hours just now were completely wasted. Fortunately, Sunian didn't know. Well, not knowing means that he has never done it. You can look forward to it, Lee Baikin said bravely. Sunian nodded seriously, his eyes filled with anticipation. Although the male and female protagonists Huo Linyuan and Lan Min have gone abroad, Sun Ying'er's competition is still being held. Sunian had nothing to do, so he went to find her to interview the contestants. But after staying with Sun Ying'er for a while, she couldn't bear it. After all, it's okay for one person to have the same face, but if a group of people all look the same, it's really boring to look at them. This made Sunian couldn't help but get closer to Sun Ying'er. Aren't you tired of seeing it? A bit. Sun Ying took a sip of coffee. I'm still thinking about what I loved about Huo Linyuan before. Maybe it was his face. Now that I look at it every day, I feel like it's nothing more than that. Sun Ying'er said this and looked at Sunian next to her. She was really grateful to Sunian now. Over the years, the Sun family has been urging her, hoping that she can successfully marry Huo Linyuan, which will bring more benefits to the family. Although Sun Ying'er has known that she is brought to the family by marriage as long as she can remember. The kind of benefit. If Sunian hadn't found her and the Li family behind her had entered the situation and promised some benefits to the Sun family behind her, it would have been impossible for her family to encourage her to act as recklessly as now. This breath was completely released. But now that we are going to run this competition, we must run it well. If we fail, then Huo Linyuan will laugh at us. Sun Ying'er's eyes were full of determination. She knew very well that Huo Linyuan regarded this competition as a joke, so she had to make this joke come true. End of this chapter. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Wich Jong Word. Chapter 348. Chapter 348. Don't mess with women. Seeing how energetic she was, Sunian picked up the coffee next to her and took a sip. If that's the case, then if we broadcast the draft live and sell the advertising space, we might be able to use Huo Linyuan to make money. Sun Ying'er looked at Sunian. You. After all, let's see what's good in choosing. If we don't play big, then others may think that we are choosing male favorites. You also said that Huo Linyuan is waiting to laugh at us. If we choose to live broadcast the game, let all people criticize him as a superior CEO. Sun Ying'er. Josu, who was waiting next to him. Josu felt that if his boss Li really failed Sunian, he would definitely end up miserable in the future. As expected, don't mess with women. Sun Ying'er also fell silent. Sunian also realized at this time that he seemed to have said the wrong thing. The reason why she does whatever she wants is because Li Baikan still has the support of the old man. Even after Li Baikan died, the entire Li family was in her hands. Plus she lived once in her previous life, so she felt that she could mess with the male and female protagonists. It is considered to reduce the burden in the future. At the same time, it feels good to have a career on behalf of the male protagonist. But I forgot that Sun Ying'er didn't have the confidence like her. There are many intricate relationships behind each aristocratic family. Although the Sun family behind Sun Ying'er is now profiting from following the Li family, if Huo Linyuan provides greater benefits, the Sun family may side with Huo Linyuan. Sunian sighed helplessly in her heart, and suddenly found that her life was a little too smooth, which made her crazy. Just when Sunian was about to say something to lighten the atmosphere, Sun Ying'er spoke. Sunian, these are the tricks you want to use against Li Baikan. Josu. If it is like this. Josu couldn't help but think that if Li Baikan didn't turn around, he would be safe. The old man might actually support Sunian in doing this. Ahem, Josu didn't want to admit it, he still felt a little regretful. Li Baikan, you don't want your salary anymore. Sunian felt a little embarrassed when Sun Ying'er said this. After all, she really hadn't thought about it. Her strategy is to get Li Baikan seeds and inherit everything. I think if we do this, then Li Baikan will not be able to scum you. If Li Baikan scums you, then what will happen to him? Sun Ying'er clicked her tongue a few times, and looked at Josu when she said this. If I remember correctly, the person next to you has been with Li Baikan for many years, and he nodded, which proves that my point of view is correct. Josu. Sunian also looked over. Josu, you seem to know a lot. Josu immediately expressed his position. Madam, you may not know that I have selective deafness. Sometimes I don't hear anything, absolutely nothing. Sunian, aren't you hiding your ears and stealing the bell? Josu. Sunian laughed when he saw Josu like this. Men, there is no good thing, so what a man says doesn't count. Sun Ying'er echoed from the side. Josu was completely shot. Sun Ying'er looked away and retracted her gaze. I'm really a bit late to see each other now. Maybe we were not destined before, but now we are destined. Sunian looked at Sun Ying'er. She really felt a little pity for Sun Ying'er in her previous life. Such a bright girl has become a sacrifice for the love between the male and female protagonist. If that's the case, why don't we get married to Jinlan? Sunian came back to his senses. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Wich Jong Word. Chapter 349. Chapter 349 Josu's Grievance. What, sworn not with Jinlan? This time, Sunian couldn't keep up with Sun Ying'er's thinking. Yes, I feel really close to you now. It's different from the plastic sisters and flowers I usually come into contact with. And you are the mistress of the Li family. If I can buy you something, if I give you some money, then you may not like it. When Sunian heard this, he thought about it and realized that this was indeed the case. Don't you want to be my sister? When Sunian came back to his senses, he saw Sun Ying'er's nervous look, and said quickly, No, no, absolutely not, it's just that the sworn relationship with Jinlan can only be seen on TV. When you suddenly said this, I didn't react. Sun Ying'er, have you reacted now? Sunian nodded. Sun Ying'er then laughed. Looking at Sun Ying'er's smile, she felt that her life would be interesting. For example, starting a career with the sisters, and still following the example of the male protagonist and the female protagonist, starting a career together and becoming a strong woman. Sunian felt a little excited when he thought of this. Could it be that she would be like those rebirth novels read by the young girl Huaichun and reach the peak of her life? Well, if you think about it, it would really make a difference. After all, in my previous life, I waited until Mo Bao grew up before killing the male and female protagonists. And Mo Bao also suffered a lot. If he had solved the male and female protagonists in advance, then Mo Bao would be able to grow up happily in this life. When thinking of this, Sunian felt as if he had found his direction in life. Sun Ying'er feels that sworn vows are a big deal. So I specially found a very accurate master to calculate the date, and everything must be carefully selected by her. At first, Li Baikan believed that Sunian should be happy. After all, she was not marrying someone else or cuckolding him, so he supported her unconditionally. But this day, when Li Baikan passed by Sunian who was picking things up, he stopped and looked a little ugly. Because he heard Sunian complaining in his heart. Hey, I have never chosen something so carefully before I got married. Li Baikan. Ha ha ha, I have married Li Baikan twice. I was not even present at the marriage certificate. They were all synthesized through technology. I don't know where I have read it. It seems that in some places, sworn marriage is as important as marriage. Indeed, sisters are sometimes more reliable than men. Li Baikan was thinking about Sunian's recent high spirits. Can't help but hold my forehead. Li Baikan then went to find the marriage certificate. When he saw the marriage certificate, Li Baikan's face suddenly turned dark. Because the photo on the marriage certificate didn't look like him and Sunian at all, so it couldn't be that the photo wasn't theirs. Li Baikan's heart skipped a beat when he thought of this. Hunted for Josu immediately. But you don't know if you don't ask. Li Baikan's mood became even more depressed when he asked. Because Josu said, since Mr. Li was busy with important things at the time, I didn't have time to take pictures, so I used my mobile phone to take a picture of your usual appearance, and finally used AI to combine it into one picture. AI synthesized, don't I usually click on my ID photo? Josu felt aggrieved, you didn't give it to me. You gave it to me at that time, and then the chairman also urged me. I couldn't help it, but don't worry, I'm the most expensive AI you can find, so very similar. And this certificate guarantees legitimacy. Picture. Like AP. How about you consider divorcing your wife? Do it again, Josu suggested weakly. Li Baikan glanced over. Josu lowered his head. But Josu was really aggrieved. It was clearly because Mr. Li didn't care about his wife in the past, so how could you blame him? End of this chapter. The vicious female supporting character's character collapsed after her voice was eavesdropped. Author, R.O. Wich John Word. Chapter 350. Chapter 350. I have a sister. From then on. On the auspicious day chosen by Sunian and Sun Ying, the two of them solemnly bowed to the sky and the earth. This made Li Baikan a little envious. Everything between him and Sunian seemed casual. But Li Baikan just sighed. He knew that although the past things could not be changed, he could manage the future things well. Their days are still long and they can fully make up for it. He wants to make up for it. For example, a grand wedding. For example, those rituals that should be done, and some more. It must be made up for. At this time, Josu silently moved some distance away from Li Baikan. Because Sun Ying is older than Sunian, she naturally becomes the elder sister, and Sunian becomes the younger sister. When she stood up, Sun Ying held Sunian's hand tightly and said sincerely, "From today on, you are my sister. Don't worry, I will definitely take good care of you. From now on, no one will dare to bully you, because from today on, you will be protected by my sister." Sunian was slightly startled when he heard this. You must know that throughout the whole process, Sunian was just having fun, just like a child playing house. I feel that Sun Ying has the same personality as me. If they join forces, the male and female protagonists Lan Min and Huo Linyuan will definitely cause trouble. But these words now made Sunian a little speechless. Elder sister. Li Baikan understood what Sunian was thinking when he saw her like this. In her previous life, she was so happy when she found out she was pregnant and had a relative, which showed that she felt insecure and lonely. Behind her smile was loneliness. Li Baikan walked to Sunian's side at this time and gently hugged him. Sunian also came to his senses, and then a smile bloomed on Sunian's face. "Sister, don't worry, I will be good to you." These words also made Sun Ying laugh. She glanced at Li Baikan. "Mr. Li, from now on you will also become my brother-in-law. As a sister, you must speak clearly. If the sister is wronged, then I, the sister, something will definitely be done." Although Sun Ying knew that why they were able to deal with Huo Linyuan so unscrupulously was all because of Li Baikan's support, she still had to say what needed to be said. After all, if you lose, you don't lose the battle, and you must have a good posture. Li Baikan smiled after hearing this. "I understand this. After all, Huo Linyuan has learned from the past. If I have a problem with my brain and cannot recognize people clearly, the end will definitely not be much better." Sun Ying She just said it simply. Unexpectedly, Li Baikan would actually say this, so Sun Ying could only cough lightly. "It's good if you can think like this. After all, there is a saying that 100 years of cultivation can cross the same boat, and 1,000 years of cultivation can sleep together. You and Nian, it is not easy to be together with Nian. After all, it is not easy to get married. Li Baikan, I hope you can cherish Nian. Nian is really a good girl. Not to mention anything else, Li Baikan's attitude is quite acceptable. At least it gives me face, ha, and it satisfies my vanity." Li Baikan looked at the smiling little woman next to him, and the corners of his lips also rose. Although Sunian said that those love books were written by a group of singles, it is also useful to be familiar with theoretical knowledge. After all, it is better to know some knowledge than no knowledge at all. End of this chapter.